Welcome to Backstory and Beyond. My name is John Daniel, and I'm humbled to be your host. But I'm thrilled to be here with a radio veteran, an icon, and his name is Mike McVay. Thank you, Mike, for spending some time with Backstory and Beyond. And I'm honored as a human being just to be in the same space with you, man.
John, thank you so much for the invitation. It is I who am honored knowing the number of people and the quality of individuals you have interviewed in the past for this program is pretty cool that I get to be included with them. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Look, let me just share a little bit about Backstory and Beyond. It's a program designed to help people become their best. It's not complicated. We look at issues such as calling, service to other people, peak human potential, and purpose. And ultimately, when we speak to individuals like yourself who've really lived a life of looking at those kinds of integrity points, so much can be learned from it. And so I just want to kick off and let you share your backstory. Now, I've got lots I want to talk about with our audience about who you are. Matter of fact, let me do something right now. This man is a radio veteran. He's the former executive vice president of content and programming at Cumulus Media and Westwood One Radio Network. Most recently, it's been announced that he is an award winner. He has many, many awards, but in particular, the NAB 2025 awards announced him as a radio icon, which we all know he is. This man is the president of McVay Media, a full service media company that is adapted to the needs of all media, including content creation, podcast creation and development, digital content, syndication, radio programming, talent coaching, and artist development. And quite frankly, Mike has developed a unique media strategy designed to meet the needs of all of his clients. All that said, Mike, go right ahead with your backstory. I just wanted to get that in because there's so much that's rich about your history, and I want people to know it. Take
Now,
it.
thank you. Thank you. I'm humbled. When people ask me my story, I always start with, my upbringing. I was raised in a little town in southwestern Pennsylvania called Youngwood, PA, blue collar family. My father worked his entire life on the Pennsylvania Railroad. My grandfather, on my mother's side, was a railroader all of his life. And so my grandfather helped his son-in-law, my dad, get a job in the railroad, which he did for 45 years. Um, Growing up in the 50s and 60s, as I did, my mother was pretty much a homemaker, as they used to say. And she raised five kids. I was the youngest of those five. I got my work ethic from watching my mother and father work.
Hold up. You were the baby boy.
I was, and my mom used to always say, "This is my baby." Even when my hair had already gone gray, she would introduce me to someone and say, "This is my baby."
I, I'm
Um,
right with you. I'm the baby boy of 13. And she did
oh.
the same thing when she was alive. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry. When you said that, I didn't know that. I love it, man.
Yeah, and when I look at you, there's always two ways to handle your hair changing gray. You shaved yours off. I literally used to do low lights and I finally gave up. But my mother, who passed at age 89, once said to me when my hair was starting to go gray around age 40, "You need to dye your hair." And I said, "Why would I do that?" And she said, "Because you make me look older." But so I grew up in Youngwood, PA. I had wanted to be a Lutheran minister. Um, and I don't have a formal college education. Took classes, never graduated. Got a job when I was 15 working part-time at the local radio station. And for those of you that are geographically challenged, Youngwood, PA in southwestern Pennsylvania is maybe a 45-minute to an hour drive out of Pittsburgh. It's actually about the same distance to Morgantown, West Virginia. So it's down there where PA, Maryland, and West Virginia come together. Started in radio there, went to Wheeling, West Virginia as a program director morning guy. I worked in Charleston, West Virginia, PD morning guy. Got a job in Los Angeles from Charleston, West Virginia, and I in LA was a started as the assistant PD corporately and got the PD job. From there, when they announced they were selling the station, I went to Louisville, Kentucky. And while that may seem like a market step down, it was a great situation because I had two radio stations I was over, an AM and an FM. I was an ops manager as well as program director, and they taught me sales. From there to Cleveland, Ohio, where I live now, was an ops manager of an AM FM there. I actually was only there about 6 months, and they told me they were going to change the format of the station, wanted me to stay. I disagreed with what they were going to do. And believe it or not, I was right. They made a mistake.
Mhm.
And I left and went to Mobile, Alabama to be a general manager. Spent a year in Mobile, Alabama, came back to Cleveland because I'd still owned a house. My wife is from the Cleveland area, from Ohio, actually more close to Wheeling, but she had family here. Came back here as a general manager for 2 years, and in 1984, launched McVay Media. We built it up to a couple hundred clients, and after 28 years, sold the pieces of it to my other consultants, and I joined Cumulus Media Westwood One as their executive vice president of content and programming. Did that for 9 years and restarted McVay Media back to being a consultant. But the difference today in the original McVay Media, where we had 200 clients, we had 28 employees. Today, I've got um, about 20 clients, and it's a family business. It's me. My wife is our general manager. One of our daughters works for us, creating a show prep service we have. The other daughter handles all of our digital and social media and new media consulting. One of my son-in-laws produces audio, and he works with Yay Networks and other clients of ours like that. The other son-in-law is a lawyer. He's not in media, but I always joke and say everybody needs an attorney in the family. And so that's who we are. That's who I am. It's a family business, and we govern our business, and I've always tried to govern our business with the golden rule in mind. That goes back to where I was a Lutheran wannabe minister. And so faith has been an important part of how we manage our company and how we operate our lives.
I love it, sir. And there's so many parallels that are just encouraging to me that or hopefully our audience will embrace too. And I believe they will. Faith makes a huge difference in times when there are things we don't understand, and we just have to throw at God's feet and let Him take care of it. So I love the notion that your family now is moving forward with McVay Media. I mean, there's got to be something special for you there, given given the road you've traveled. I just want to stop there and just enhance that, if you would elaborate on that. What you're feeling, and I ask that's very specifically with intentionality. What you're feeling about working with your family as you just described.
It's really, I mean, it is a blessing. And all three of the children involved did media before becoming a part of this version of McVay Media. The oldest daughter went to Miami of Ohio, had aspirations to be a journalist, and ended up modeling and lived in LA. And when she came back to Ohio, the kids always worked summers in the office at McVay Media. And so she started working with my wife, who continues, the two of them continue to work together on this daily show prep service. And so that daughter, Nikki, does that for McVay Media. But she also has her own podcast. She also has her own little media Substack company that I think she does quite well with. I'm very proud of her. Our youngest daughter, Jessica, or she likes to be called Jay, um, also interned with us at McVay Media. Daniel Standig, who's someone who runs a company called Futuri, worked with us as a young guy.
Mhm.
He and Jay are about the same age. We hired Daniel to run what was called McVay New Media to build digital up.
Mhm.
And Jay took to working with Daniel, and that led her to be a co-host of a nationally syndicated show that Premiere had called The Dawson McAllister Show. She lived in Nashville for that. She has worked at radio stations in Nashville as a co-host. She was a co-host of a news talk show, Doug Steffens' Good Day, and did that up until about a year ago, when Doug opted to retire from that. And so today, she still does, as I said, social media. She still works with Doug doing his weekend shows, but she had other broadcast experience before joining us full time. Our son-in-law, Ryan, the story I always love to tell about Ryan is he and our daughter, Jay, who are married, went to high school together and they
Mhm.
were just friends. They didn't become romantically involved until years later during their
Wow.
college years and after college, actually. And Ryan was one of the kids that would just come to our house. And a lot of the kids would come here and say, "What do you do for a living?" Because they'd look at the big house and all that. And I'd tell them, and they'd go, "I could do that because it sounds like it's fun and easy and you don't have to work hard." Ryan was the only one who really spent the time and interviewed me on what I did. And he had gone to school, college, but I said to him, if you really want to do radio, then you need to go to a broadcast school or get into a college program. And he opted to go to the Ohio School of Broadcasting. And that led to him getting a job at what were then the CBS stations in Cleveland, first in sales, then in production. Then he worked at the Rock Hall, producing an overnight radio show called Moonlight Groove Highway,
Mhm.
that was nationally syndicated on Sirius XM. And then I hired him to produce the Donny Osmond Show, which
Wow.
was a network show that was nightly. And that led to him getting more jobs in radio. And now, as I said, working with McVay Media. He was at Westwood One. I mean, I'm proud because there's no nepotism there. They all worked in other jobs before coming back to this job. So you can probably tell the tone of my voice and you're able to see me smile. I'm very proud of them.
Absolutely. And you also underscore a pearl of wisdom, and it simply is the power of being there, being present, being mindful where you're at. I mean, you had the opportunity to move without a college degree,
Mm.
to become something that people admire because of your hard work. And it sounds like you integrated that into your family and the notions there. As you've discussed the different components of the different family members and what they do with McVay Media, I'm curious because you've already talked about some of the objectives, but I want to give you the opportunity to expand upon the mission, vision, values, objectives, if you want to, of the organization that you think are important and underscore the integrity of what you do.
Life is always evolving and so is business. And when McVay Media first started, and my wife, who's always Doris, has always been very instrumental in the company, and she started with me as my partner in the business when we'd been married about 5 years at the time. And the original objective, frankly, was let's see where this goes.
Wow.
People kept calling me and asking me for advice. I'd been successful in the radio stations I'd programmed and managed, and I knew there were consultants out there. And so the two of us decided to start the business and just see where it goes. And my attitude was, I can always get a job. If I do this for 2 years and it's not happening, I'll get a job. And so at the end of the first anniversary, she and I went, first anniversary of our business, we went to dinner. And she said, so one more year? And I said, no, I think it's 5 years. Let's give this 5 years.
Ah,
And at the end of the second year, she said, is it still 5 years? And I said, there's no longer a limit. And, we ran it for 28 years with the attitude being, we're going to go wherever this takes us, but we're growing broadcasting. We're building a media company. We're helping people accomplish their goals. And it's never been in the original McVay Media or in this new version of McVay Media, it's never been what I want to accomplish. It's what do you want to accomplish? And then I sit down and figure out if I can help you accomplish that.
it speaks.
I am
I'm sorry.
rare. I'm sorry.
You please go ahead.
I am rare from what I see with some of my competitors that they'll take any client, and I won't. I don't want to ever fail your expectations. I don't want anyone to ever walk around and say, we paid this guy for a year and nothing happened. It didn't work. And they're agitated at me. And so I will turn down business. And as my wife likes to say, I sometimes fire clients because if I can't get them to do what they want to do or what I think they need to do to accomplish what they want to do, I have sat down with people before and said, look, we're just fighting about this. And I feel in my heart you're not going to be successful doing it your way. And I can't take your money for that. And so I'll walk away from that. And so there's a principle that comes back to it's not about me, it's helping you get what you want. Early in my career, I read a book called The 1 Minute Manager.
Hmm.
And that book by Kenneth Blanchard was about how to manage people in a positive way, but with guardrails and discipline. A follow-up to that book was The 1 Minute Salesperson. And a line in there that's always stuck with me is when I give my prospect what they want, I get what I want. So when I give my client what they want, I get what I want. I want them to be successful because then I'm successful. If they're not successful, I fail. And so that's a big part of my focus. When we had the larger company, and I had at one point 12 different consultants working for me, I remember sitting with one of our consultants and I was giving him a learning moment, let's say, because they weren't paying attention to a client who needed their attention. And that consultant said to me, they only pay us this little bit amount of money a month. And I said, here's the problem with that. If I buy the very best car on the road and I get it for a fourth of what it's worth, I still want it to run like the very best car on the road. So it should never be about what they paid for that service. It should be about giving them the service like they're our highest paying client. And so those are principles that I continue to live by and serve clients by. That's very principled to me. Now, here's where the evolution comes in. When we started consulting radio in 1984, it was just radio. Deregulation changed things in 95, where suddenly people were able to own more than 12 stations. They could own multiple AMs and FMs in a market, but the government was still very much involved. In 2000, when a lot more shackles came off, suddenly there was not a number of stations you could own, but it came about the Fair Trade Commission. It became about, do you have a monopoly? Are you serving your community? And so those things prompted expansion and change in our business. And as I said, in the early 2000s, we created McVay New Media, which was a digital company, and that's what it led to. Today, my clients include radio stations, streaming services, digital companies. It includes branding and imaging businesses. My clients are, as I like to say, radio adjacent, but I also have people who have nothing to do with radio who are hiring me for marketing. And that includes music artist managers, that includes experiential marketing companies that create money can't buy experiences. And then, as I said, all of the audio platforms, podcasting, radio, streaming, on demand are all out there. And so the same principle is there, but my business has evolved where radio is now about a fourth of what we do, but consulting networks is radio adjacent. Coaching talent is radio, television, media adjacent.
You have touched base with every one of the elements of why backstory and beyond exist. Service to other people. And let me be very specific on that point. You create innovation meeting the customer's needs based upon including their needs in what you do. Now, that may sound like inclusion is used in so many different ways today, but inclusion really starts with need. What is it that customer needs that somebody else doesn't need that I can provide? You spoke about really looking deeply to the point where you would fire, quote unquote, a potential customer because you knew you couldn't provide their needs.
Right.
It's special, sir. And so, as we go to that point, one of the things you articulated just now is the transformation of the media industry. You're telling me that what you learned in radio is transferable to podcast, to TV, conventional, however it might come, streaming. And there's a reason for that. Please share your thoughts on what's happening in the media world right now, given technology, and how you can continue to use it to provide a full course to your customers to meet their needs.
The consumer, which is the audience, really doesn't care where they get content. They care about the content. And so I like to say great programming, great content uses every part of the cow. And so a great example is, you know, my friend, your associate that you've met over the years, Stephen A. Smith, or another person that I coached, Soledad O'Brien. I coach and consult the John Tesh Show. They are all smart people who create great content and have it available on legacy media, be that radio or TV, um, on podcasts, on streaming, as bites, little content bites on social media, YouTube channels, wherever. And today we're living in a Dick Tracy world. And those of you who don't know who Dick Tracy is, it means you're young and Google it. But Dick Tracy used to speak into his watch. And we have that world today with the Apple Watch or the phone. I have a granddaughter who's 14 who never calls it her phone. She says, my device. I can't find my device because it does everything for her. It's about the thumbs. She doesn't have a laptop except for what she has to use at school. And so what radio and media has done, is doing, has to do is be multi-platform. You cannot be pure play. You can't say, I'm going to be a TV only company or radio only company. Because if you do, you are eliminating the necessary distribution to put your message everywhere. And that's the reality of it. Be everywhere, be seen and heard everywhere.
Understood. How does an individual in any media platform manage distinction between information, misinformation, and disinformation? If you will, fact versus fiction. Because on all those platforms, being everything for everybody to present it, there's a lot of opportunity to drop the ball on what's fact versus fiction.
You just hit on a hot button for me.
Sir.
I am of the belief that the difference between commentary and news should be identified. There is only one that I can think of. Now, maybe there's others, and someone will tell you or I this, but there's only one talk program that identifies itself as being a conversation and not necessarily news, being opinion and not necessarily facts. And that's the Glenn Beck show.
Mhm.
And he's way out there to the right. But the opening of every show acknowledges that it's a fusion of fact, opinions, and conversation. A lot of what is really opinion is presented as if it's news. A large part of the audience believes that if they see it on social media, then it must be true. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so I have worked in a world where we would discipline, even terminate a news anchor who at the top of the hour would offer opinion when we were supposed to be delivering news. But those lines are blurred. And I don't know how we get around that. While I would love the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to lessen some restraints on legacy media, I'd like to see them bring some things back. I think um, you know, when we lost the equal time requirement, it changed a lot. It used to be if I had someone running for governor for one party on the air, I had to have all of the governor gubernatorial candidates on the air. That doesn't exist anymore. But the other part of it is legacy media is the only media that's governed. And so streaming, podcasting, cable television doesn't have the same requirements. That's why you might hear profanity on a over the cable network's news program that you just can't hear in other places. Now, I don't want to get into the morality of because I'm good with not hearing the profanity, but it's not a level playing field. And as a result, John, I just don't see how we can bring truth to the picture unless there are those platforms that are fully committed to pushing out fact-checked truth.
Absolutely. And it brings me to the point that citizens in their homes, on their blocks, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, in their cities, in their states, in their countries, et cetera, owe themselves a leadership duty to make sure that their children and they understand the difference between the two. I just don't think that media in and of itself, based upon the current transformation, can leverage this massive change. However, it's going to take a number of stakeholders to be involved. Example, do I think media could teach in the community how to distinguish fact from fiction? I think it could. Do I think that it could increase its connection with the people who are their audience? I think it could. You just have to take the time to think about it. You know, we live in an ecosystem. There are circles of support or circles that don't support. And it's always been that way from the dawn of time.
Hmm.
And so the question is, what uniquely can the media do to distinguish fact from fiction? I think there's some things there. Um, and you rightfully pointed out, when you have the democratization of media as we do now, it started with the HBOs of the world where you could say anything you wanted to. You could do a lot of things you wanted to, but now they're no holds barred. Anything can come out there. And so the question is, where are our families and children, fathers and mothers, starting with the people that they're raising? I honestly, between number one, faith and understanding what faith is all about, principally, you know, by reading scriptures, whatever your discipline, that's important. But then, secondly, I think it's important that we really work with our families. They can deflect and redirect nonsense coming at them because somebody will sell them the London Bridge. And that seems to be happening. Sir, thank you for taking some time on that point because I think it's critical. And when I was in Amsterdam recently, it was a big point of contention to distinguish information, misinformation, and disinformation. And obviously, we're living in that world right now. All that said, I'm curious about your feeling and your thoughts about this award from the NAV show New York.
It's an amazing honor. And wait, here's what's crazy. It's 9 days before I'm inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame.
Oh,
And so that was already on my radar. I had been told I was being inducted. And the NAB reached out to me to say, hey, you're getting our special National Radio Award. And they told me it's about people who serve broadcasting, who help broadcasters serve their communities, and who've left a mark on the industry. And that touched me because when I started at 15, that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than me. And as a kid growing up outside of Pittsburgh, my dream was to one day be on the air in Pittsburgh. And I thought that would be the end of a career. And so exceeding my own expectations at such a young age was very positive. But it also then encouraged me to live it forward and to pour my life into others' lives. And so this acknowledgement makes me feel as if I've been successful in doing that. That's what that means to me. It's not as much of a career achievement where going into the Hall of Fame feels like an amazing, amazing career achievement. This feels like accomplishing what I wanted to in pouring me into others. And so that's from above. That's from somewhere else. And so it means a lot to me.
I adore that, sir. It's bigger than any of us.
Yes.
But we were vessels on a higher mission, and it makes a huge difference. As you talk about your family, there are examples of it. As you talk about your clients, who you are not just showing concern that a business person would. I'm gonna be honest with you. You know, it's love, it's service, it's belief. And if you look at those three words, all of them end with VE. The Greek analysis of that says those are words of action, not inaction. And you made that happen, sir. And I just admire it. Look, you might be crying in a minute, so I'm going to stop. But just a few more questions, and I'll just kind of share with where we're going. I definitely want to have an opportunity for you to share anything that you feel as though should be shared for an audience trying to become their best towards the end of this. I definitely want to get your thoughts on inclusion in the media industry and why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important if you think it is. Um, and then finally, um, I have something relative to another person I interviewed who I'm sure you're familiar with, Evan Shapiro.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
did a movie for $65,000, which is going to be aired on Tubi for free in November. And the point he was trying to make is let's look at different models, Hollywood. He wasn't saying, Hollywood, you're no good. He wasn't saying that. He was saying there are a lot of people who want to voice their experiences. And this is a way to look at the possibility of doing what you don't have billions of dollars. And so, but I'll start just with the thought of anything we've missed that you want to talk about.
Well, you mentioned inclusion, and so, you know, there's been so much controversy lately about DEI and how we need to take that away and strip it out. And and back to people only knowing what they see in social media, it's that there's always bad in everything.
Mhm.
And so they just see that. But here's the reality of it. If we were a fair and balanced society, we wouldn't need to focus on inclusion. We wouldn't need to go out of our way to say, let's give everyone an equal opportunity. And we don't have a fair and balanced society. And so, sadly, the government's stepping in to do what we should do as good people has been necessary in a number of cases.
Mhm.
But my encouragement for inclusion would be hire the best person to do the job, but look at everyone and truly be appropriate and positive and fair in your evaluation. There's a man named Terry Fox that you may know. Terry is a guy who was a radio air talent. He worked in small markets, built his way up to working in New York City, worked sports in Dallas, went to ESPN for a number of years. Um, Today is running content and programming for iHeart's Black Information Network.
Mhm.
Terry is someone that I, as a consultant, hired to work in Sacramento in the mid 90s to do the midday show just a couple years ago. And that's where Terry and I first met and became friends. Just a couple years ago, as he and I were sitting with someone else, he said, Mike hired me, a black man, to be on during the daytime in 1995. And I went, wait, what? And yeah, I was only overnights or nights before that. And I said, I don't get it. And he said, people weren't giving people of color on mainstream stations daytime jobs. And I said to him, I never knew that. That's where we need to get to, and we're just not there.
I concur. And you took me back to, the 70s, where on the middle school, playground, we knew when Bill Cosby or Richard Pryor was going to be on Johnny Carson. Now, we weren't supposed to be up that time of night, but we weren't going to see too many people who look like us. Maybe Julia, the show, we'd see that. But ultimately, um, people don't recognize the power of what you just said. To feel like you belong, you have to see something that looks like you. You have to
Yeah.
hear something that had experiences like you. That's not a matter of hue of skin or gender. That's a matter of humanity and trying to help people move forward to be their best. I agree with you 100%, sir. And I think you've articulated some pearls of wisdom in this discussion. Much, much appreciated. Um, let's talk about Evan for a second. Your thoughts on the idea of creating a movie, a Hollywood length movie, and then putting it on Tubi for free. All he was trying to do was get his $65,000 back. And he anticipates that's happening. He used a bunch of young creators to make this movie. It's called Skits. And obviously, I haven't seen it yet, but I've had some discussion with him about it. And he's also made some postings. I'm curious as to how it unfolds. And one of the things I'll give him credit for saying, look, it hasn't shown yet. We'll see what happens. But I think the key that somebody could do that is a lever to offering opportunity to share voices in ways that people could see them. Even in this circumstance where media bites are what people are looking for, depending upon what social media platform they're on. But it's nice to see a good feature length movie. But what are your thoughts on that in terms of what the future holds?
Well, I think it's fabulous, and I'm curious as to what he shot it on. There are people shooting films on their iPhones, um, and and so we're living in a creator's world where you're not dependent on a movie studio or a big corporation spotting you and saying, "We're going to give you a chance." You can create on your own and post it and see if it takes off virally. And so there are people on TikTok who are becoming stars for
Mm-hmm.
their music or
Mm-hmm.
becoming influencers because of what they're selling or getting hired for Saturday Night Live because of the humor they have. And so living in this creator environment is very positive. It also magnifies more voices
Mm-hmm.
as his voice
Mm-hmm.
and what he wants to put out there. And I just think that's fabulous. I think that to allow people to create music in their bedroom and then push it out to the world, record labels today have people whose only job it is to watch TikTok all day
Mm-hmm.
and look for artists. When you and I were young in the 70s, you had to go to bars.
Right.
You had to,
Right.
you had to work all day, 9 to 5, and then go out at night looking for artists and acts. So what Mr. Shapiro's doing is pretty amazing and something that I think we'll see more and more of. Micro entertainment, micro messaging is becoming a very important thing to
Mm.
young people as well. We're seeing it in politics. That should be lost on us. On the last presidential election, how much money was spent on digital for social media and content creators?
Well said. Well said. This has been a glorious and delightful conversation, sir. As we come to a close, and I hope the dialogue between us doesn't come to a close, but is there anything that you want to share that you haven't so far?
Well, I have two things, and they both evolve around young people. One would be mentoring. I am time impoverished, but I find time to mentor. And
Yes,
I
sir.
would encourage everyone who's got more than 10 years in the business, whatever part of media you are in, 10 years or more, mentor someone because we've all had mentors. Maybe you haven't sat and thought about your mentors, but somebody mentored all of us. So 10 years or more, mentor someone. I have 4 people I'm mentoring right now. And, as 1 year of mentoring on these 4 is winding down, I've said to them, hey, I need time now to help others, but I do want you to touch base with me once a quarter. I want to hear how you're doing because mentoring is important. The other thing which deals with young people goes back to something you said earlier about showing up. Because I was not college educated and I don't have a college degree. I started reading every book I could in my late teens and continue to do that today to self-educate. And I watch everything I can because I have to work harder to be smarter than my competition. And working harder is being there and putting in the hours and not phoning it in ever. There's never a moment where I show up and I'm just there. If I'm there, I'm engaged. So the two things I would say, both dealing around youth, one, to those in our business who are doing this, mentor someone else. Those who are young and on the way up, show up and work harder than anybody else because that's what will advance your career.
Mike McVay, it doesn't get any better than that. Thank you, sir, for being you. And I look forward to seeing you in New York soon when you receive that award. And perhaps we can eke out some time to do something in person. But blessings to you and your family.
John, thank you.